Hello, and welcome to the Healthy Wealth Experience. I am your host, Chris Hall, and I am really excited to bring you a special edition of the Healthy Wealth Experience. This one really has nothing to do with health or wealth, but it's just very fascinating. And these folks reached out to me, and I just really thought it was exciting and something to talk about that not really many people are talking about. So here we go. We're going to talk about that's called the Simpkinson NASA Archive UFO investigation. I have the co-investigators here. Ed Wilson. Say hello, Ed.
Hi, guys. Nice to see you.
Thanks for being here. And then Seth Lamancusa, and he's the other co-investigator. Thanks for being here, Seth.
Thank you.
Okay, so here we go, guys. Again, normally our podcast is generated around like things that are health or wealth oriented or stuff like that. But again, you guys reached out to Madison, our production manager, and she just thought this was like fascinating and want to talk about it. And I like this kind of stuff too. So for those of you guys who are used to listening to like talks about carnivore diet or cancer or wealth management, either come with us or don't, but it's going to be fun. We're going to have a good time. We're going to geek out on stuff that probably is very exciting to most people. So here we go. First and foremost, Ed, tell us a little bit about yourself and how this thing all started out for you.
I'd be glad to, Chris. I'm really excited to meet you people out there. From what I've seen of Chris's work, you are a well-educated and very, very capable audience, and I'm pleased to be able to present this evidence to some people that I normally don't reach.
Thank you, Ed. That's very
Well,
nice.
thank you and your audience in advance. This is a real opportunity to get some of this information out to people who normally would not be on these channels. Let me explain, first of all, that this is about a UFO find that we've discovered, that we are in progress of completing 3 years of research on it, and it's very extensive, and it's all documented. It's all NASA photographs. It's all NASA archives. It's all NASA reports. And it's, of course, there are other things. There's CIA, Freedom of Information Acts. It's all government certified images. You can look them up, and that'll be the big thing in this book. This book will provide you with the links you need to get on the web and actually see for yourself that these stories that we're about to reveal and the facts that we're about to reveal are not anything that was taken from someone's rear yard or anything like that. Predominantly, I'm a historian. What I've done for the last 20 years is I've gone to auctions all over the country and made a living because I am very well versed in history and the research necessary to understand history honestly with footnotes and documentation. I go to auctions and I will buy and rescue treasures that are predominantly rare books. I'm a rare book dealer. I'm a map dealer. I'm an early art historian, a lot of that. But all the things that I do require intensive research to make sure that they're authentic. I buy them and then I sell them on national auction houses, and they end up in museums all over the world. It's a great point of pride for me that I have actually rescued many items, many books, many documents that are now in museums around the world. That's fulfilling. It's really a nice feeling. What happened is Seth will stop me when I get off track too much, but I went to an auction on March of 2023, researched it thoroughly, and I actually went to a pre-auction examination to try and determine whether what I had discovered they were selling was authentic. And boy, it was authentic. It was misrepresented. It was represented as the NASA archive of Emily Ertl. But what was unknown at the time was Emily Ertl was the girlfriend, or as my girlfriend would say, the wifey of Scott H. Simpkinson. Simpkinson was the original engineer from Lewis Field, and he started there in 1943, was actually working on propeller pitches for the fighter craft during World War II, which was still raging in 1943, for those of you who are not actually up on the dates that they represent. 4 years later, he was already a 4-year senior engineer working on all the NACA, National Association of Civilian Aeronautics. That was the time of the Roswell incident, and it's just a curious thing that he was about 3 hours away drive from his airfield in Cleveland to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Part of what I want to get through about the first book here is just the tremendous, tremendous advancements that society has made in my lifetime. I was 11 years old when this mission, Gemini 11 mission, took place in 1966. 11 was just the perfect age for a young man to be involved in seeing his nation strive on a great, great exploration. So I went to the auction. She had been misrepresented because she was the girlfriend. Scott Simpkinson died in 1996. And here's the other key point I want to get out right away. Many people say, well, I've been involved with UFOs all my life, and I have never seen this image. The reason is because it had been in the basement of Emily Ertl's family since 19. So this was I have just released it. No one has ever seen it before. So that will explain to people that this is very, very current. The investigation I started in March of that year has brought 2 books forward. I had to cut the first book down. It was 650 pages. I had to cut it down from 950 pages. I have scientific reports that I couldn't include in them. I can only make the book so big. So what you're going to see in that book is the best documentation that we have that Seth will provide at the end. Simpkinson is the guy who was the very first NASA Space Task Group head engineer, and he built the very first Mercury capsule. What you're looking at is the 1948 image of the Lewis Field Space Task Group original. You can see Emily Earl, who, by the way, is the very first female NASA employee at Cape Canaveral. That's all detailed in the book. And you can see her nestled in the arms of the kind of chunky-looking guy. That is Scott H. Simpkinson, and you can see they are centered in there. That is the Space Task Group. The Space Task Group were the people who were charged with building a space program to catch up with the Russians after the tremendous Sputnik debacle, where the United States was recognized around the world as second-rate compared to Russia's space movement. So that was critical.
For those of you who are listening,
point out, and then I'll let you get into other things, is you will find in this book the 150 earliest NASA photos. They're the earliest because Scott Simpkinson is the guy who built the original blockhouses. That was the very first Mercury capsule. That was it, that launched on the Big John. And he built that. And he was a critical engineer throughout all of NASA's history up until his death in 1996. To tell you what you're going to get in there's a beautiful photo archive. These are full-page pictures, many of them one secret. You'll see inside this book blown up debris from the early Mercury spacecraft, and that's why I kept this one. I did not sell any of this because this is the original. This is like watching the building of the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. This is like seeing them stock Magellan's course around the world. These photos are the one archive that nobody else has. There were 17 Mercury missions.
So what did you find in the back of this archive of never before seen NASA photos?
You will find all these books. I'm not beating around the bush. This is the actual, there we go. That's the actual.
For those of you guys who cannot see, we are going to make sure that we link to all the things that Ed is showing us on the screen.
Yes,
we will. And
those are just showing a lenticular UFO along the lines of what that one guy said in Area 51 was the sports model. It's lenticular. It has what we'll call portholes, but they're very aberrational.
And you'll see how that leads
to the fact. Yes, it's a classic flying saucer. Thank you. Well worded, Seth. But I sold the 560 NASA photos that was in his archive, 560 of them, okay? Of those 560 some photos, I sold 280 of them, sold for $80,000. The photos in this book are very special, okay? This is recognized as a special archive. With that said, these are the real genuine thing. And they were just discovered in March.
Was the leader of that mission, practically.
Yes.
Of course, once we find this photo, he gets to wondering, is it legitimate? I mean, it's tucked into the back of Scott Simpkinson's binder, but how do we prove that it's authentic? And that's what basically led us down the rabbit hole of trying to investigate the thing. And I didn't come along until partway through Ed's investigation, but among other things, we investigated the mission transcript itself. And an interesting feature of the mission is that the astronauts, over the course of their how many orbits around the planet in this mission, look out the window and remark multiple times as to bright flashes or objects passing by the windows that they can't really recognize. They chalk them up to meteors or what have you. And then additionally, we went ahead to the National Archives and we were digging through the mission report, and one of the experiments that was done on board the craft was the D-15 experiment. And that was where they took a TV camera up into space for the first time. And they were taking photos, and that footage had never been released publicly necessarily, but the National Archives had it, and we acquired it, and there's about 16,000 individual frames. And so what Ed did, he painstakingly swept through each of these frames looking for any kind of anomalies that might corroborate the Simpkinson photograph itself. And what we found in one of them in particular, and several of them have some kind of striking, like maybe you could consider them anomalies, maybe you could chalk them up to lens flares, but one of the photos in particular, and we can show it on screen. I can send you the actual photograph so that we can make sure it's visible. It really bears a striking resemblance to the Simpkinson photo. It's a string of lights. It's curved. Is that the one? Yeah, that is the one. He overlaid it onto the background.
That's the
there.
one that,
We'll have
that was done by Dr. Brown.
Yeah.
So Dr. Brown did that one, and you'll have to see that one.
Yeah, it's really.
There we go.
It's quite striking. But yeah, there's also a YouTube video. One of the links that you can YouTube video that I made, which is just like a 10-minute overview of the investigation, kind of overall, because there's a couple different features that are quite interesting.
Yeah,
of the mission.
I'd love to have a link to that as well.
What's interesting in that one was, and that's how I met Seth, was I was speaking with Dr. Brown from Ohio State University, and he was helping analyze some of the videos or the footage that we have. And he was instrumental in getting into the SAW conference. He regularly attends the SAW conference at Stanford University, which of course is probably the premier investigative force in the world as far as uncovering these items. He made that composite, and it just wonderful revelation. The frames that you see, the wonderful thing when you actually get the images and start looking at this lithograph, everybody poo-pooed it right at first. They said, well, number one, it's a lithograph, and there's a big explanation to that story. And I'm excited because I now have all the CIA links that show that this was actually, the lithograph was a sanitized briefing version that the CIA and NASA both produced in order to share the information without too much detail and briefings to all the important people. You're just going to find it absolutely convincing. The actual CIA documents, bunches of them, where they mention everything that is done with that document.
So it feels like obviously, you guys have found this, and I mean, just recently NASA and the CIA and all these people have sort of said UFOs are real, right? But it sounds to me like you guys have found something that's like proof that they knew about this, 50, 60 years ago.
Yes, and the links go back there. The first CIA links that will tell you, and all of these things are revelations that were not made public. Now, everybody's always suspected that NASA had ties with the CIA, okay? We've all suspected, we've all taken it as a national security necessity, but they still, I have got a CIA link to the memo from 1956 through 1958, the high-pack CIA documents. And you'll be able to find these in the CIA reading room, too. All this stuff you can read for yourself. But they actually say we don't want anyone to know that we are now writing herd over all the photos, and all the photos will now have to be cleared with us. That's a document from 1965, and it called the Gemini 5 mission. During the Gemini 5 mission, when they were finally getting some good quality photographs from the capsules orbiting the Earth, and many of them, specifically what triggered the whole thing was they took a picture of their home base at Cape Canaveral, right? And they thought, well, let's get a series of pictures and show the guys back down there what they look like. And they did that, and they looked and they made a montage and said, "Geezy cow, this is perfect ICBM missile target information data. We cannot have it." That's exactly what happened. We have that memo, and that starts the whole ball rolling, where they're saying, don't let anybody know, but you're no longer a civilian agency, and you no longer have control over this. We now have control of this. And it's the foundation, basically the creation of what's called the NPIC, which is a National Photographic Interpretive Center. That is a vessel created by the CIA, okay? It specifically was created because they had to have a way of cataloging and documenting all the space photography that was starting even back then in 1958, and actually started with a U2. Now, Seth is a real U2 photo guy. He can tell you some of the stories there. But it
Yes.
starts with the U2 photograph. And then that was all secret information, and they had to have a way to classify all those images. And the important thing is these lithographs, and it tells you every. It's got the Heidelberg press. It's got the day they bought it, the model that they bought, the other press that they had, the lithographic press. All these things were critical because they had to brief so many people in the government, and they needed they needed visuals to help convey the points of what they were discovering. And they found, as I said, when the Gemini 5 mission came around, the military looked at that and they said, "Cheesy cow, why don't we just give the Russians a map, all our information? And let's just let the Russians know, by the way, how detailed our photography is, so
Who
that
is,
they can try and
if
find
I might
methods of."
interrupt, who is Richard Underwood?
Oh, Richard Underwood, we determined. Now, these are files that you have got to see, people. It's JSC, the Johnson Space Center, okay? These guys started building NASA, as you can see, in 1958. In 1996, the Johnson Space Center realized that, guess what? We have a tremendous historical wealth of information here that's about to be lost forever. So we are going to do 2-hour interviews with every single surviving NASA engineer from the time when NASA was born. And they started that in the last half of 1996. Unfortunately, Scott Simpkinson died in the first half of 1996. But of all those dozens and dozens and dozens of 2-hour engineers in depth explaining their lives at NASA, the importance of what they did, the details of what they did. And in all of those documents, of course, Scott Simpkinson comes up repeatedly. Even though he was dead, I found at least 16 different files of all the young engineers trying to get things done in Congress, trying to get the space shuttle. They couldn't get the FAA to allow the space shuttle to ride on back the 747 Guppy that everybody was doing. So the guy says, "I'm racking my brains out. I can't get this passed, and we've got to get this shuttle returned back for refurbishing." And so he said, I know what I'll do. I'll go to Scott Simpkinson. He went to Scott Simpkinson. Scott Simpkinson got on the phone to Congress, spoke to them, and the FAA approved the Guppy and the space shuttle that week. So this is who this guy was. He was tremendous. He gave lectures. He was the MC at a lot of the galas. I've got galas and stuff where the NASA employees were celebrating their tremendous achievements, and he would be the guy who's doing the MC work there. What I'm lost track of, thank you for getting me on track in the first place. You see how hard it is for me. I've got 20 pages of information backing up every fact that I tell you guys, and it's hard for me to process it without the whole thing tumbling out of my mouth. So back to the important part, Richard Underwood was an amazing character. He was a CB during World War II, and as a CB, he would offloading ammunition and stuff in the Korean War, the World War II, and he was a guy who got the GI Bill, and with the GI Bill, he got degrees in photography, and he worked for, I guess you'd have to say, the CIA, and back then. What he did was, and as I said, Seth is the great researcher on here. Seth brought up the U2 anomalies and the history of the U2 program. He was a photographic analyst for the U2 program, okay? Now, Congress knew nothing about the U2 program, by the way. The reason they did, what's that? I was just saying Congress didn't know about the U2 program because by that time, they already were wise to the mistakes of all of our top secret classification modes. When something is classified back in the early days, and there's a whole history of obfuscation, a whole history of getting around Congress, because as we know, if there's a buck to be made from it, a guy in Congress is going to make it, okay? And that may work well for him, but guess what? Russians knew about the U-2 program before Congress did. So that is, and those things are documented in the book too. You can actually listen to Gordon Cooper talking about how they came up with sensitive but unclassified. The reason they did that is this: Congress, by law, has authority over all the military documents that are classified. The civilian agency, NASA, was not military, supposedly, so they had a lot of unclassified information Congress never got it. So anyways, Scott Underwood was a guy who was working for the CIA as a photo analyst, and this will tell you a little bit of something about how dangerous these the circumstances are that these whistleblowers we're talking about, what they face. As a photo analyst down in Honduras, I believe the missions he was working on were gravitational anomalies that they had to get because the gravity of the Earth is not consistent everywhere, and you need to have maps of these gravitational anomalies if you're going to get an ICBM to track properly to its target. So these very, very important information.
That's fascinating.
And it is, and this whole history, you can find the details of it. It's all in this book, and you get on web and find it. But the important thing is this: he was doing that information search of all the photography on U-2s and B-29s, and he was in Guatemala. And while he was in Guatemala, he got off the plane at the airfield to meet with a military cohort there who were doing these scientific analysis, really, but military. He got off the plane, and he saw there on the airfield the most beautiful Guatemalan girl, and that absolutely stunned him. He was, like many of us, he was heartstruck, and he married her. That's a wonderful part of the story. He stayed married throughout his life. They raised 4 kids. They went to school in Houston and all that. But here's what happened to him when the general in charge of the mission found out that he had married the Guatemalan girl. He immediately pulled him aside, and these words are you can find, this is nearly verbatim, except probably 1,000 words less. You can read it in Richard Underwood's JSC interview, where he tells about the general pulled him aside immediately and told him this, and it's not much of a paraphrase. He says, "I should have you shot right now without a trial as a traitor to your country." Fact. So these whistleblowers are under tremendous pressure. This is not imaginary things that these guys face. Things,
Second time this has happened.
yeah. Well, it's happened with the topics that we have
Seriously,
in
it
the
happened
CIA.
to me too.
Well, yeah, it's just the way that it happens when this topic is being broadcast, and hopefully you're still there.
Yeah, man. I mean, and the
I'll
connection has just
continue on.
so spotty. Me too. Has the
Yeah,
connection been
yeah.
spotty for
So
you, or is that on my?
let's see, you and one other. Okay, I do not see Chris, so I don't know how we can get Chris back on. We'll just have to interrupt right here, and for editing
God,
purposes, we'll
Wi-Fi
stop
must have
here
got.
and see Chris. Oh, what did you do last time that happened? You downsized. Oh, we were showing pictures then, and we didn't have the bandwidth. So, but oh, wait a minute. I just had a text. I bet that's. Oh my good. Hey, they just had a power outage in California, Seth.
Oh no.
Hang tight. I'll be right back. Very good.
Oh,
So he
all right.
lost
Well,
his
might as
power
well
outage.
wait.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. But we already made a marker right there. Hopefully that he'll be able to edit what's going on.
Yeah, I bet he
Good
will.
job, Seth. Thanks for
I'm gonna
riding.
fill up my water bottle while we wait for him to get back.
Yeah. Good opportunity. Good opportunity. Wow, power outage, huh? So much for this. Hey, scooby doo. Well, when I have a power outage up here, Seth, it takes me several minutes for my computer to get back online. But that probably has more to do with me than the power outage.
Yeah. Crazy this keeps happening.
Interesting.
It's always something. It's
Like I
always
said,
something. I wonder what caused.
when you work so hard, you don't have time to enjoy the Skinwalker Ranch. I try never to miss it. Okay, of course, that's got our friend Travis Taylor, who did that wonderful report for it on it. But that's the same thing that happens with every one of the engineers that come in to perform one of his experiments. Every one of them is on camera saying, this has never happened before. Every single episode, they bring technicians in. Do you ever get a chance to watch that, Seth?
I
The
only watched
Secret
a
of
couple episodes.
Skinwalker Ranch?
Yeah, just a couple episodes of it.
Oh my God, the engineering. There we go. We had power. Everything is powering up right now.
Oh,
And,
good.
and good. Yeah, so it's just like me. How about that? Well, thank goodness we don't have to do too much. There we go. So weird. That's what he says in his text. So weird, huh? Just like I said, just like at Skinwalker Ranch, every engineer who
Or
works
for the
on this kind of yeah, it's just well, I'm used to it. I remember when my Chat GPT said, "Hey, wait a minute, someone else is here." I said, "Okay, great, very good." So, anyways, Seth, while you and I are talking, I've ordered the book written 11 months ago, the book that I've ordered, and the one with all the CIA documentation of the connection, the hidden connections over one secret, was written by the guy who is retired now, but he's the retired archivist of the Smithsonian Institute National Space Museum.
mm,
So it's wonderful. He covers the years. I go back to 1950, 56 through 58, and come up with the early documentation of all the CIA involvement in creating the National Photograph Interpretive Center. All matches our lithographic information exactly. And what was just wonderful to find that he corroborates the years between 1958 and he actually goes up through the space shuttle. But all his documentation is valid, and I pulled the exact same information. Some of the exact same missions come out. It's all 100% CIA direct declassified information. So what it comes from is what do they call that thing? It's called the CREST format. There's a website called the CIA Reading Room where all the declassified and released CIA documents are stored and kept and quantized. And
mm.
that's where this information is coming from. And you can click on those links. It's like me, though. They still obfuscate. That's a tough word for me. Obfuscate the information. Just like now with those Epstein files, they're releasing 20,000 Epstein files. Well, they release them in trundles, right? And that's the way the CIA briefing room works, too. I've got like 5 or 6 page listing of every single document's classification number. But you have to have the main number that they do it under. So it's like a file folder system. They released maybe 5 or 6 files, and in those 5 or 6 files, there's 200, 300 memos in each one. So to
Mm.
get that direct link, you have to have the file number first, and then you can go through and get the links. But I don't, yeah. But you
Chris,
can find them.
Yeah, I thought
The
that was a little
topic
bit
is,
odd. We were talking about UFOs and stuff, and the power goes out.
yeah. The technical difficulties may preclude you and us from finishing a good interview. But there's so much stuff, so many facts, so many details, so many images, and we would like to get you a good presentation. Hopefully, we'll be able to enthrall some of your people into pursuing what is yet to be concluded. Although Seth and I were just discussing, there was a book written last December that was released, and it's all about the exact same connections I've made with my research into the CIA documents. Now, I've done maybe 5 or 6 Freedom of Information Act requests for the first book. of those Freedom of Information Act requests. I was grateful to Colonel Carl Nell, who of course is one of the great whistleblowers and is able to provide leads on where some of the information that we were looking for is to trying to track down this information might have gone. And it was great, but they came up negative. Now, with the discovery of this new book, plus my information from the CIA briefing rooms, or the CIA reading room, I should say, we've located dozens and dozens of hitherto never explored CIA documents from their own reading room that tie down the lithograph as it's definitely a cleansed briefing document. And it tells you the machinery that they purchased to do it, the history of the NPIC, the National Photographic Interpretive Center, was created in 1956 through 58. These are a tranche of documents called the HIPOC documents, where they went to a building in one of the less expensive regions of Washington, D.C., and the building was called the Lewis Building. It was a 7-floor building. On the bottom 2 floors of that building was a car dealership. And when they went to create the National Photographic Interpretive Center, where they would view these U-2 documents and all the space documents and all the missile documents, and there they would create lithographs for sanitized briefing productions. It's a wonderful history. All the documents there provide the equipment that was purchased, the briefings that were held, some of the information of why briefings were canceled due to the too much information going out, the request that they do things like, please do not let anyone know that we're involved in this because that is classified information. NASA was supposed to be a civilian organization. We realized that it couldn't be. But this is absolutely startling, bulletproof proof that basically we were misled. We were misled, and we do see that the CIA has full control and had full control and still has full control of all those documents. So,
Hey, Ed, let me ask you a question about this. So, when you were going through all your investigations and you had all the different things that you were looking at and cross referencing and stuff, did any of the documents that you read for the CIA or NASA or anything, did they refer to why they wanted to keep this stuff quiet? I mean, clearly, they obviously did want to keep it quiet. But what I'm saying is, like, do they ever refer to it and say, like, hey, for the good of humankind, or to not make people paranoid, or did they mention anything about what their motivations are, or for military domination? Is there anything that they mention that makes it go like, oh, that's why they did it?
they certainly do. Here's a CIA formally recognizes the value of NASA photography for overhead intelligence. The year is 1965. The primary agency division is the CIA Office of the Deputy Director for Intelligence. The document reference is NASA Space Photography, CIA RDP 80R 01580, R 200 04, blah, 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 blah. The policy recognition establishes the baseline CIA interest in NASA imagery. Okay, and the next one from 1965 is similar bunches of numbers from the Project Gemini photography. Now remember, this is the Gemini 11 mission, and this is the real proof that NASA Gemini film underwent interagency analysis prior to publication, and it demonstrates that NASA CIA tasking relationship for photographic analysis. And in there is link that explains exactly the story that I already told you about how we just provided the Russians with a map for their ICBMs to Cape Canaveral.
No, and
This is all about military. It's all about military clearances. So far we have not uncovered. And now remember, this is just information that's already been released over all these years. Okay. Our new FOIAs are in the end. It will be into those links, but with specific search terms. We know the number of cameras that were on the mission. There was the Maurer camera. There was the Hasselblad camera. You will find exactly where every person out there, you can all go out and see these UFO photos yourself, okay, and make your own analysis by going to Arizona State University March to the Moon website. There they have the first 3 manned mission categories. They had the Mercury, the first one that this book has documented so well. The Gemini, where we find the actual UFO photo, and then, of course, the Apollo mission. All those photos are in there in Arizona State University. We were one of the final people, I believe, to get a Freedom of Information Act through NASA. You may not be aware, most people aren't. I have to follow this stuff closely because I am a historian. This year, NASA is no longer a civilian agency. It is now officially a spy agency. That's happened since we've had the last change of government. So getting those FOIA acts, I'm still submitting them. I have some great ones with specific locations to go through, and I will be having help from the former archivist of the Smithsonian Institute, and he was the space, what are they? Smithsonian. I loved it. I was at the Space Museum, Space and whatever museum of the Smithsonian Institute. He was the archivist. He published a book 11 months ago, and I've got the book, and it documents
Ongoing
the swap.
investigation. Ed, if I
Yeah,
up for a moment. I'd like to weigh in on
sure.
you have to know why would they want to kind of hide why would they cover up anything to do with the UFO phenomenon in the first place? And I think that there's some insight that can be drawn from the Robertson panel documents that were released. These were from like the early 1950s, just after the flap, just after the Washington flap, and just after like there's some history after the Roswell, of course. This is like 5 or 6 years after that. They cited three indirect dangers that UFO publicity could create. There's clogged communication channels, like if there's low quality UFO reports, they'll overload channels of communication with, and even if they're real, these what I find striking about this document is that they don't frame these reasons or these rationales as being like specific to the UFOs being fake. They basically just say, listen, we might wind up with clogged communications channels, which is going to make it harder to counter actual kind of intelligence threats or national security threats. There's a cry wolf effect for real attacks that's kind of along the same lines. And then there's a psychological vulnerability and like the risk of a foreign nation exploiting with some kind of clever propaganda if there were to be too much kind of attention drawn to the UFO phenomenon. So it's basically just a question of national security. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what a lot of this stuff comes back to.
Seth was a guy who pointed out that Robertson document to me, and as he says, yes, those are the three reasons in that document, and Seth did a great job of finding the significance of that. And then we've been able to tie that in with some of the other reasons. Number one, too, I want everyone to understand how sympathetic I am to all this secrecy. You have to remember, if you have a son or a daughter and they're in the military, okay? Maybe one of your kids had to go over to Afghanistan. Maybe one of them had to serve in a military branch somewhere else. For one, I cannot advocate anything that would threaten our children who, unfortunately, in this world we live in, have to face mortal peril whenever they're in a war. These things are very, very important to our security in a rough world. So I do not fault them for doing that. But the problem is that now we're entering a new age. And in this new age, some of this information needs to be released. And of course, it goes back to a copy of the book to Seth, Philip Corso's book, The Day After Roswell.
Yeah.
Philip Corso was an amazing man. And he was not wrong, okay? He was not wrong.
Corso
He
actually
was
alleged that,
responsible.
sorry. Corso alleged that the U-2 program was actually, among other things, used for UFO-related reconnaissance. So they would fly these U-2 planes, which Richard Underwood would fly potentially over Russia to spot UFO crashes in the motherland in order to collect UFO-related intelligence. So that adds another layer to the mystery surrounding Underwood succeeding from the declassified U-2 program on to working on the Gemini mission and being in charge of all the NASA photography.
Excellent point. Excellent point. And to continue along those lines, just from Underwood's, you need to fully read Underwood's testimony in that 2.5-hour interview. Here's a point that I want everybody to understand right now, and you can get it from Underwood's direct testimony. There's a lot of people out there who have looked at these photographs and marveled, okay? Now, what I'm going to tell you, you can read for yourself in Underwood's verbal testimony from when I think it was 96 or whatever. There's no one out there, neither you nor your friends down the street, nor anyone else out there has ever seen a first-generation NASA photo. No one. Underwood explains this and testifies exactly how they did it. He worked for the CIA. The documentation of all these NASA photos that you can find and look at Arizona State University, they're beautiful high-definition scans, and the original film's probably still in Building 8 in the freezers. I mean, there's just so much information, man. But you have not seen a first-generation photo. In his own testimony right there, he explains exactly the process of how he did it. He explains the film, the differentiation between the film. So when you go to get original negatives, that's one of the things we pointed out to Congress. When you go to get it, guess what? He didn't use regular film. They were so advanced back then in what they were doing, and the weight constrictions that they had in getting all these missions completed were so intense that he will tell you in his own interview, the film that was used in the mission cameras was the width of saran wrap.
Hmm.
Amazing. So that's how we can tell when we go to Congress, and then when they say, well, we want to see the original negatives, that's a key indicator right there. That's in his own testimony. So if you're not looking at something that's the width of saran wrap from those coolers and freezers, guess what? You're looking at a second-generation film. And Underwood says, flat out, he says, no one has ever seen more than a third-generation print. Flat out. That's his testimony. No one has ever seen that. And he obfuscates it. He worked for the CIA. His wonderful. These guys are working with the National Intelligence Photographic Center. Every mission has. Underwood knew every photograph down to the second, to the orbit, and exactly what there was in each of those, in each one of those photographs. And that's in one of the amazing things. We found the photograph that is the basis for the matching. Here's just a raw image here. Here's a report that we've done up, made a nice poster, and there you can see that's S66 54585 over here somewhere, and that's you can find that in these March to the Moon archives. Okay, what I've done there is I've magnified the cloud cover in it. In the second book, after we located the 3 orbits done during the D15 experiment with those 16,000 frames of film, they were all time-stamped. There was a button that he held the television camera control apparatus in his lap, and whenever he saw something that was worthwhile recording, of course, the TV camera he was looking through was all electromagnetic signals, and it went through a cathode ray tube that they used to get the cameras. He also had a button that would transfer to 16-millimeter film. Hence, that's where the 16,000 frames of 16-millimeter film from the D15 experiment came from. That's what we examined. That's where we found these amazing photos that kind of match the aberrational, the lithograph. You look at those portholes, and I call them portholes because, we can't discuss because we don't know exactly the mechanism that they use to make these kind of operational instruments. And that was one of the big criticisms. They said, look at the portholes on that thing. Look how sloppy they are. They look like they're coming off it. They said, this is a hoax. This is a bunch of crap. Well, guess what? We got the D experiment, and that photograph that I showed you that matches by Dr. Brown. You look at that and you will see that the D15 film shows the exact same aberrations in the portholes on that craft directly beneath the lithograph. And we've done some interesting experiments trying to match them with the Fourier analysis, et cetera, et cetera. And they are very, very matching. You can tell it with your own naked eye. And that's the second book, too. Before I always run out of time, guys, I apologize. I can't. The reams and reams of evidence of all the things that we've found are in my mind, and I can't stay with them without going through 4 or 5 pages. There's a second book, guys. There's a D15 footage, okay? And this was supposed to be deleted. If you look at the upper circle and the lower circle there, do you see that craft? That is the UFO that was supposed to be deleted. That's film number JPG5, I do believe. And if you go a few frames before that, you will see the first one in the image. What they had, and that's what's in the briefings. Seth's got some wonderful links that you will see where he records the actual voice transcripts. And that was the first thing I looked for. I said, well, these people, if I was up sitting in this spacecraft and that UFO flew by me, I don't care what the training said. No matter how intensely you trained me, I would have been so startled and dumbfounded that I would have made some kind of comment that was a leak. And that's where I started. So I searched those things. And by God, Seth got that on his link. Say, you can look at the voice transcript. And these voice transcripts, all these reports, guys, they were secret for 12 years. Yes. So this 1966 mission, in the book, you will see the cover of the mission, and you will see the documentation and the Secrecy and the Clearance Acts, and you will see the seriousness of this thing, and you wonder why people don't talk. We heard about Underwood, how he was threatened with death, and you hear about it with all the new testifiers, too. There's a serious threat to these people. Mm-hmm. So these were secret for 12 years. So from 1966 to 1978, nobody had seen those voice transcripts, okay? I shouldn't say nobody, but no unclassified person was able to see those voice transcripts because they were classified for 12 years. Also, we have the exact technical debriefings. Of course, you got a military debriefing. As soon as these guys came back from the carrier where they had landed and got back, they were militarily debriefed. And it's in the military debriefings we have the exact statements that they make about how they talk about the D-15 experiment and how it went so well and we could see so well out of it. I know I was supposed to take photographs every 2 or 3 minutes, but I didn't do it because it was already working so well. We didn't need to analyze it. So I didn't make all the photographs that you guys requested that I made. And then it says, with exception to one, and that was during the D-15 experiment when the Stack 2C Charlie battery failed. And that was apparently when he did make a photographic record on film, that 16 millimeter film. Now, this is what I wanted to explain was why this D-15 experiment occurred. The D-15 experiment in the Gemini 11 mission was the first television camera in space. The apparatus was back behind the mission capsule, actually, and it was, you can see, I've got the actual mission briefing material where you can see a picture of how the apparatus worked. The camera was the RCA D-15 dim light experimental television camera. It was actually called an orthicon tube at that time. How it worked was behind the Gemini capsule in the equipment compartment there, they had a little flap door, and the flap door, which they activated immediately after the gravitational experiment was finished, the flap door opened and there was a mirror on it, and the television camera shot through that mirror direct ahead of the capsule, and that's what they used to make the footage. The reason they had this experiment in the orthicon tube was absolutely amazing. Guys, we were so primitive back then. We didn't know anything. We didn't have the internet. When I was in school, I was using the slide rule, guys. And this stuff, the internet didn't, and it didn't happen during this time. All this stuff in the reports had to be paper, okay? That had to be paper reports. But what was the point I was making, Seth?
Hey,
about
Ed, let me see if I can redirect you a little bit on this. So, I mean, you've done all this research. You've spent 3 years on it. You've got the information. You've corroborated it. You've basically cross-checked it with other information that you found since from the CIA and other NASA records. So, I mean, you clearly have something here that is really cool and special. What's next for you? I mean, you've been doing this for 3 years now. You've definitely got the information that you wanted to prove that you've got something authentic. So what's next for you on this? Are you going to look for other abnormalities? Are you going to continue to further try to just investigate this until what I guess I'm saying is obviously this is exciting information and it's really fun to talk about. What does Ed want to do with this? What does Seth want to do with this? What do you guys want to, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 from years from now, what do you want to accomplish out of bringing this information to light?
Exactly why I'm glad you stopped me right now. I see that we've already run out of time. Here's what's coming, folks. Here is it. This is a release that no one has seen before, okay? And this is what's coming up. Right here are the files from the CIA reading room, the individual files that prove, okay, that NASA's creation of the National Photographic Center, okay, actually created debriefing documents. The lithograph, we have proven that the lithograph is based on a real photo. We've got the cloud pattern matching it, and now I've got Freedom of Information Act request I sent out 6 weeks ago. Oh joy, to the CIA, received their specific request. We have the individual files, we have the names, we have the most full documentation that has ever been provided to the National Reconnaissance Office, which was tied in with each the CIA, the National Reconnaissance Office, and NASA. All three of them are documented in those CIA files that I just showed to you. And I have already submitted to each one of those departments Freedom of Information Act request. Unfortunately, I had to send them about 6 weeks ago when we couldn't even get on an airplane because the government decided to shut down. However, they're still there. And I am working right now to present this information. I'm merely waiting on getting the responses from those three agencies onto these extensively detail-oriented Freedom of Information Act requests. And I am working with Congress and will be continuing that search to make sure that we do not get blocked and obfuscated through this process.
Yeah.
They have
Uh-huh.
there's a thing
That's just
we've included.
what
Bob,
going forward is more transparent. So actually, you may not be aware, the Age of Disclosure released today, and this is one of the most thorough accounts by some 34 government whistleblowers who have come forward and alleged an 80-year arms race to reverse engineer non-human technology and, retrieved biologics, the whole 9 yards. So my point is that disclosure, broad government movement towards disclosure, is gaining momentum by the day, and I think that we're both hoping that the Simpkinson case can shed a little bit of light, or at least draw a little bit of interest toward what exactly NASA's been doing this whole time, if we're now taking the idea of a non-human intelligence and unidentified flying objects seriously. You kind of have to imagine that America's space agency would have had some knowledge of that.
Right. Sure. Sure. And again, like I think you said something about reverse engineering, people are talking about how, there's probably, dozens of inventions that are probably reverse engineered out of spacecraft if they've had it. I know that I had heard something about, this is a story I heard one time about, like, the reason Elon Musk does so much open source stuff is because there's actually a law from the like 1950s that doesn't allow you to have certain patents on certain kinds of things. And they're saying it stems off of the idea that the government knew about certain technologies, but they didn't want them to be patentable because they didn't want them to be researched because they already had them.
very well put. One of the first acts, Colonel Carl Nell came out and he explained how the 1952, the Atomic Secrets Act, when we're trying to keep the atomic bomb, or the hydrogen bomb at least, secret from the Russian scientists, the Atomic Secrets Act was an all-pervasive thing. Colonel Carl Nell says that's exactly where a lot of our earliest space information went. It went under the Atomic Secrets Act, so you have a good source there telling you, but it actually had the 1952 Act. And then, of course, the Atomic Energy Commission morphs into the Department of Energy. I've done Freedom of Information Act requests on all those departments. Like I say, Carl Nell was a godsend as to being able to track for us some of the obfuscation that went on in that procedure. Yes, guys, this stuff is genuine, okay? And as a historian and an old man, I need to portray to you the fact that you really need to take a look at the book. Look at these earliest pictures. You will see the Gemini capsule on the back of a pickup truck with split screen windshield. We knew nothing. In fact, the reason the split screen windshield on the truck is there is because we didn't have the technology to make a full screen, a full-size windshield that was shatterproof. That's how primitive we were. You look at that picture of the Space Task Group. My God, that's a dirty, dingy little hangar that they have the Gemini capsule on. You look at these pictures. The components in there you're going to see are hand-built, actually Atlas rocket components, okay? These were secret documents. They're in there. Look at them. And of course, then you get the majestic panorama of those spaceships, those early spaceships, the courage of the guys who went into them after watching them blow up right in front of their eyes. the primitive nature of it. The Gemini 11 mission was critical. It was the first time we were able to calculate a rendezvous orbit within one orbit of launch. That was important. We couldn't go to the moon unless we were guaranteed that when that LEM spacecraft left the surface of the moon, it would be able to rendezvous and come home within one orbit. And that was done until that mission. These things are out there. Go to the back of the mission report from Gemini 11 in 1966. The last 22 pages of that report, the last 22 pages contain over 300 addresses, names of corporations, governmental departments, the office numbers, and that report was 350 some pages at least. When you look at the breakneck speed of what was being done then, the Gemini 11 mission we didn't have the internet. Those 350 pages ended up being in over, what was it? Well, they had to count every single copy because it was classified, and they had to know how many copies they sent to, say, McDonnell Douglas. They may have sent a dozen there. Each one was numbered. The office was numbered. The location was numbered. Everything is in those last 22 pages. The total number of just the mission report alone, let alone the debriefings and all the other reports they did, is over 350,000 pages of paper. They had to print those 350,000 pages of that mission report, get it out to the engineers, get it out to the corporations, have it examined by the engineers who were building the craft, and guess what? They had to analyze it and get it back to NASA before they launched the next mission in 30 days. 300,000 pages.
Wow.
Every one of those pages is located. There are people in there, there are names in there, where you guys out there get into these reports. You will find corroborating evidence or locations to check or people to talk to who have inside information. And that's how you do reporting, and that's how you study history. It's in there, guys. Please help out. It's the most rewarding thing I think you'll probably ever do. And I want to thank you all for looking at it. You're a bunch of educated guys out there. Hey, I'm old. I'm trying not to die, but not real hard. It's a great life.
So how do people get a hold of you guys? Like, what's the easiest way to like become part of your group? Like, if you want, like, do you guys have a Facebook group where people can get in there? And
I've got,
all right,
so there's a link with any luck in the description to my YouTube video on the subject and to my Google Drive folder. So at that point, I think people can just email me if they'd like to get in contact with us regarding the investigation.
Perfect. And then the book is on Amazon, correct?
Yes, both books are on Amazon.
I'll put a link to the book.
We haven't advertised it at all. I wrote the books to get it out because, I just wanted the information out. But there's been a lot of misinformation put out there. We have 5 scientific reports in there. One of the scientists apparently leaked some of the information to some guys, and it became known around the world. And there's misinformation, and they send it off to the guys who are professional debunkers, and they don't even know what they're looking at, but then they debunk it immediately. So that's why now Seth and I are making some podcasts out here. We've got to get the real information out. These are real facts. You have to know that when you research it, go for the Simpkinson UFO. The original Gemini 11 UFO can be found in the Black Vault, and that turned out to be the proton rocket. All these things are covered, but there's research for you guys to do. There's work for you to do. There's history that needs to be studied by you young people so that you can actually delve back into these things and find out exactly why some of these things were done. And absolutely, Seth has made us the highest definition possible film of the Deep 15 experiment. And it's
guys,
available.
It has been fascinating. Like, I know that you guys could probably talk about this for like a month and still have stuff to talk about. Because I know you went through so much, and I know that you were like, you have all this information ready to go. But I think the best thing, again, for people to do is, like, if this is fascinating to you, if you enjoy this, like, let's connect you guys together with Seth and Ed. There's books to be read. It's an ongoing
investigation.
Documents to be read. Yeah, it's an ongoing investigation. You can help.
And
so if you're interested in that, all those will be in the show notes, and you guys can check it out.
And thanks to the people out there. Your people are a class of diligent, educated, and concerned individuals who have a lot to contribute. Thank you, guys. I know you're out there.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you all for listening to the Healthy Wealth Experience. This has been a special edition that has just been absolutely fascinating. And hopefully you guys enjoyed it. And If you did, leave a comment, leave a like, leave us share. Let us know through the idea of letting the algorithm know that you enjoy this kind of content. Because the more that you like, share, and comment, the more likely they are to show it to other people, and the more likely we are to do podcasts like this. So thank you all for your time, and everybody have a great day. This episode is for entertainment and information only. The opinions expressed are not professional advice, and listening does not create a client relationship. Always consult your own qualified professional before making any financial, legal, or health decisions.